Hi everybody, it's Marquita. I know it's been a while since I did a video, but as typical, things have been happening in my life. My last video, I let you guys know that I had gotten a new job and I relocated for that job. And just the whirlwind of things that I went through in getting that job, and also that, I was fortunate and blessed to be able to release a devotional for single moms. And so since that happened, I today is Tuesday, so it's literally I've been out of the hospital for a week. About 3 weeks ago on the 10th, I went to go get my labs done. I've told you guys that I had a kidney transplant in 2009. I went and got my labs done, and I knew something was wrong. Like I wasn't really feeling myself, but I knew I was also getting ready to go to the doctor. So that's why I kind of like delayed in going. And I just thought maybe like I needed to take some iron or something like that. But lo and behold, I went and got my labs done, and then they called me back like literally 2 hours later that I needed to go to the emergency room right away because my creatinine was a 9 and my potassium was a 7. Now, for normal potassium, it's between 3.5 and 5.5. And so clearly I was way outside of the normal range. And the consequence of that is, I could have had a heart attack. And then for my creatinine, my normal creatinine as someone who had a transplant, for all of those years, it was like between 1.2 and 1.3. And with the exception of during my pregnancy, I went into like a state they call hyperfiltration, where my creatinine was like 0.9 and 0.11, between 0.9 and 0.11. And so even since I had my baby, my creatinine has been about 1.2, between 1.2 and 1.3. So needless to say, I was very alarmed. And at that, like, I broke every one of my personal rules. I cried at work, which I never do. I hate crying. I cried at work. I called my mom crying, which I never do. I called my best friend crying, and like I just was like freaking out because all I could think of was like, oh my God, what's gonna happen to me? And more importantly, like, I'm supposed to be here for my baby. Like, I need to be here. And so, while I know it was definitely a demonic attack, I also know now that, God will use everything. Romans 8:28 tells us that, all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. And so God used this situation to answer a prayer for me. And so he answered a prayer that I would learn to enforce boundaries, and that I would also be able to discern who I could trust with my child. And so kind of going to diverge for a second. And so first thing, so with the boundaries thing, I had been reading and listening to the book Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and John Townsend. And he talks about, and it's actually probably more close to 8, I guess. So everyone has a cross to carry, and we all have burdens. But the Bible tells us that everyone is to carry their own cross and to share in the burdens of others. And so therefore you have, variations. So you have people who actually will carry their own cross, and you have people who won't. And then you also have people who will share their burdens as the Bible tells them to. And then you have people who won't. And I was the type of person that I would gladly help someone sometimes carry their cross, which is outside of what I was supposed to do. I would carry my own cross, but I struggle with sharing my burdens. I struggle with being vulnerable to other people at times because of things I've experienced in the past. And so what that put me in a position to be was being used and manipulated by people, and then also basically enabling people. And so as a result of that, God used this situation to really teach me what true relationship with him and others looks like. I had to learn to be vulnerable, to ask people for prayer and ask people to pray for me, and to actually trust people with my child while I was in the hospital, because obviously, I wanted him to resume a normal schedule as possible. So I wanted him to go to daycare, and I wanted him to, at first, the first part of the and I guess I'll come back and tell that later. The first part of my hospitalization, I had him there with me because I didn't know what was going to happen. But the second part, you know, I wanted us to kind of resume a normal schedule. And so, one major takeaway from all of this is that it's important to have the right people praying for you. And as a result, like, I'm very grateful to everyone who took the time to pray for me. I set up a group me and had a group me for very close friends and family to pray for me. I also, you know, reached out to my line sisters and a few other people as well. But, you know, as a result of that, I have people that I can go to whenever I need prayer. Whether it's them, that group me I set up, or my set group of intercessors praying for me. And conversely, I recognize that as a result of this, I recognize that a lot of times we've been taught or we've allowed it, I should say, that we should ask people what they need prayer for. And honestly, I personally do not believe that I need to know what I'm praying for you about. That's between you and God. And so I'll pray, and if God gives me a word to release to you, I will share it. But if not, you know, I won't, because honestly, from my own personal experience, if someone asks me for prayer for something, it opens the door for me to be judgmental. And I know a lot of people won't be honest and admit that to you, but I'm gonna be honest. Like, it's, you know, growing up how I grew up, and the you know, just what I saw growing up. Like, a lot of times people were judged for things, and one of the things you could be judged for is what you're asking for prayer for. Like, you know, people want to start digging and asking a bunch of questions, and that's unnecessary. And I honestly feel like I said, it opens the door for you to cast judgment, and it really doesn't set the tone or the foundation for true intercession. And so the next thing I learned as a result of this whole process of strengthening relationships, rather, is that I had this limited understanding of intercession. So I wrote a few devotions while I was in the hospital, and I kind of elaborated on the intercession a little bit. But what God really showed me is that part of true relationship with Him is that because you love God and because you love yourself and therefore love others, you're going to want to intercede just because, not because of my old misguided belief. And while I think that's a great way to teach it, but once you mature in your relationship with God, you should go from wanting to intercede from others because you're not focused on your own problems to wanting to intercede because that's what you should do as a believer. And the other thing that manifested for me as a result of this was community. Like I said, I have those people I can go to pray for me, and I also have people that I can reach out to help me with my child if I need help. And so it also helped me as far as the boundaries are concerned to, you know, I could not take on anyone else's stuff. In the weeks before I went in the hospital, I just thought I had like a sinus infection because I moved to a new city. My allergies flared up, and so I felt pretty sluggish. I wasn't really feeling feeling myself. And so the week before, this is the last week of March, and my allergies really kicked in. So I got some allergy meds, my normal thing where I take allergy meds, use Flonase, and use that for like a week or two to kind of make the symptoms subside. And then I didn't feel like that was working quickly enough, so I went to the urgent care because, again, having had a kidney transplant, I can't keep infections because my immune system was not, you know, like a normal person's immune system. And so they prescribed me an antibiotic that I have had before. I actually had this antibiotic back in November when I had bronchitis. And this time, though, I had a bad reaction to it. I only took one pill, and I literally was up from 4:30 to 7 the next morning throwing up. And the rest of that week, I was just very sluggish. I had back pain. I was extremely cold, and I just didn't know what it was. I couldn't put my finger on it, and I was like, something is wrong. I just don't know what it is. But I know I'm going to the doctor next week, so I'll just, you know, wait until then, because I wanted to make sure I saw my kidney doctor and not just go into another urgent care. Because I've only been here, at the time I had only been here 2 months, so I didn't have a doctor set up and stuff yet. So it I went to the doctor, like I said, and got my labs done, and that's when I found out about, you know, everything that was going on. And so I went to the hospital and was in the emergency room, was admitted, and I was in the hospital for 2 days. They gave me some fluids, which helped me to, you know, kind of bounce back a little bit. Like, it took me from a 9 to a 5.9, which is still a very high creatinine, but, you know, I was making progress. And so they did an ultrasound of my kidney. It looked fine. My urine looked clear. And so we weren't, everything pointed to it being the allergic reaction like I thought. And I since learned that that particular antibiotic can cause an autoimmune response, which is what I ended up having. And it also can cause the anemia I was having because my iron turned out to be okay. And so then I ended up having to have a couple blood transfusions throughout this whole process. I ended up having a biopsy, and that's how they were able to discover that, unbeknownst to me, I was actually rejecting my kidney. I got my kidney in 2009 and haven't had any problems whatsoever. Then I've never had to go on dialysis, and, you know, thank God I still haven't had to go on dialysis, because one of the things they were saying when I was in the emergency room is that they may have to do emergency dialysis, but their first protocol was to give me this regimen of drugs to get the potassium down, so that way I wouldn't have a heart attack, and monitor my heart the whole time I was there. And so because of the biopsy was how they found out what was going on. And so I was admitted to the hospital for another week the following Wednesday. The biopsy was Monday. I went back into the hospital that Wednesday because they got the results that Tuesday. And I was in stage 1B, which is the second stage of rejection. And so I ended up having to get a dialysis line put in my chest here. I had to go through this 7 treatment that would help to kill the white blood cells that were attacking the kidney, because I had some inflammation because of that. Then I also had to do another treatment called plasmapheresis, which cleaned out my blood of the bad antibodies, and then I got good antibodies in another treatment. And so one thing I learned, well, 2 things. It is nothing like having a good doctor that's going to communicate with you and explain to you what's going on. And secondly, it's always, especially, you know, I feel personally invested about it, is being your own advocate. Like, I was making sure to pay attention to everything that we're doing and asking questions, just because it's not from a place of not trusting a doctor, but I know and I learned that sometimes people don't communicate. Sometimes messages aren't being passed, and if you don't advocate for yourself, if you're not aware of your own medical history, then anything could happen. And, you know, I have a child that I want to be here for. I want to see him grow up, graduate high school, college, and everything he wants to do. And I had to make sure that I was aware of what was going on. And so that really helped me to get through the process. And it was tough because I had to spend my first night away from my child because I was in the hospital. I had to, you know, abruptly end breastfeeding because of the medicines I was on at the time, and even now am on, because I don't want to endanger him. And so all of that to say, I think the biggest takeaway from this is that the reminder that as a believer, you're going to experience attacks. So I actually pulled up a few scriptures here that I wanted to share with you guys, because I think sometimes nowadays we don't remind people that being a Christian, you're going to go through things. And so from James chapter 1, picking up at verse 2, and I'm using the English Standard Version. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And so jumping down to verse 12, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. So that just drives home the fact of, you know, we're going to go through things. I also want to pick back up 1 Peter chapter 1. We're going to start at verse 6. In all this you greatly rejoice. Though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. And then lastly, 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 13 and 14. Actually, no, I'm going back up to 12. Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you as though some strange thing were happening to you. But rejoice inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed. And I want to continue on, actually. If you are insulted because of the name of Christ, you are blessed, for the spirit of glory and of God rests on you. If you suffer, it should not be as a murderer or a thief or any kind of criminal or even as a meddler. However, if you suffer as a Christian, do not be ashamed, but praise God that you bear that name. And so I can thank God because he used this opportunity, this attack, to still answer my prayer, which was, who can I trust? And how can I learn to enforce boundaries? Like, you can't have one without the other. Like, I can't carry my cross and have other people carry their cross without me being willing to open up and be vulnerable to people. And so it really blessed me. And I wanted to point out, like, I've heard a lot of people, saying that, sometimes we do things to cause these things to come upon ourselves. And granted, I believe that, but there are also some times when you're going to go through stuff, just as these scriptures, these passages said. Take, for instance, Job. Like, Job went through stuff for no reason. Apparently, if you read that whole book, like, he didn't do anything to cause those things to happen to him. Jesus, when he was talking to the disciples and the Pharisees, about the man born blind, like, he told them that the man nor his parents sinned, but it happened for the glory of God to be revealed. And so one of the things, the downsides of this is that when I would talk to some people, they automatically assumed that I caused this, like that I was eating badly or that I wasn't taking my medicines. And that's not the case. I had an allergic reaction to a drug that I ended up finding out that my dad was allergic to. And so that goes into paying attention to your body and being your own advocate. But I was glad to correct them, because they're like, nope, everything, all my tests point to it being an allergic reaction to the antibiotic. Like, my urine was still clear, which means I should have been spilling protein in my urine if it was something my body was doing in and of itself. And you should have been able to see some scarring or something in the ultrasound, which it didn't show anything. And so all of that to say, I'm beyond grateful to God for saving my life. Like, anything could have happened to me and I wouldn't be here. And I'm here today. Like, I went through, a very challenging period. Like, the last 3 weeks, I didn't know what was going to happen. And I'm blessed because I have an excellent job with great benefits and a very supportive team who just wanted me to get well. I have supportive friends and family, people that I could truly call on. And I thank God, because everything that I've gone through over the last 10 plus years, God has taught me and shown me who to go to for what. Like, I have friends that I love and care about, like, but when it comes time to pray, I know who to call. I know who to pick up the phone about. And even though now, like, with this whole process, I'm basically starting over at the beginning, God gave me hope, because receiving new blood, my blood was cleaned out. I got new plasma. I got new antibodies. I had a couple blood transfusions. All of that showed me that, God is doing a new thing in me and giving me a second chance, a new chance at life. And I don't want to leave here with nothing unfinished. Like, I want to do everything that God wants me to do. I want to live the life that God wants me to live, and I want to be the mom and do everything that my child needs me to do. And so all of that to say, like, I hope that this encourages you, and if nothing, for you to go look up that book if you struggle with issues with boundaries as well. Like, if you struggle with carrying your own cross, or if you struggle with sharing your burdens, or if you struggle with taking on other people's issues, like, I encourage you to pray about it, because God will answer. Sometimes we go through things in life, and again, that's part of being a believer. That's part of being a Christian. Like, you're going to experience difficult things, but be encouraged, because God will use it. And I'm grateful that He's even using this thing that I experienced to be a testimony, because 3 weeks ago, I didn't know what was going to happen to me. Like, I didn't know what to expect, but God, He answered. It was definitely a trying period. Like, still to this day, like, I had a catheter in my chest that they just took out, and I had to take really high doses of steroids. So if you notice my chipmunk cheeks, they're a little extra chipmunky, but I'm alive, and I'm getting better, and I'm here for my child, and I'm just so grateful, because God, time and time again, is putting keeping His hand on me and keeping me here. And I don't know what else to say. Like, I know nobody can tell me that God isn't real, that the God that I pray to isn't real. Like, because He's just so good. Like, no one wants to go through what I just went through, but if I had to go through it anywhere else, I wouldn't have wanted to go through it anywhere else. Like, He orchestrated me having this good job, like, with good benefits, and working with these great, excellent people that were caring and concerned. Because, like I said, I broke down at work. I don't cry around anybody. And I broke down and cried at work, and they let me cry. And, they just were very encouraging. And, I'm excited to go back to work tomorrow. And even with my child's daycare, like, they've been understanding, and it's just been, God's hand has been on me throughout this whole situation, from the time I walked in the emergency room to having complete strangers, nurses I've never seen a day in my life, praying for me. And even now, like, people have been praying for me and just keeping me lifted. And so I'm really grateful. So with that said, yeah, I hope that you too will learn to recognize that your relationships should demonstrate vulnerability, a willingness to intercede for others just because, and that it should have community. And that's all I have. Talk to you later. Bye.